Hello, good evening. Welcome to this special programme on the day the government finally confirmed big changes to their flagship rail project HS2 that will have ramifications for the whole of the Midlands rail network. I'm talking to you from East Midlands Parkway railway station this evening, which is on the Leicestershire-Nottinghamshire border in the shadow of Ratcliffe-on-Soar power station. We're here because for people in the east of the country, this is now as far as high-speed rail travel will take them. The eastern leg of HS2, which should have stretched from the West Midlands through the East Midlands and on up to Leeds, has been scrapped. Well, the government says its integrated rail plan means that improvements will happen more quickly and still mean billions of pounds of investment into the region. But there are plenty as well who say that this change, of course, will leave businesses in the lurch. And spare a thought as well for those people forced to sell their homes to make way for a project that's no longer going ahead. Well, plenty of reaction coming up, of course, but first, here's how the government made that announcement earlier on today.
Mr. Speaker, this new blueprint delivers 3 high-speed lines. First, that's Crewe to Manchester. Second, Birmingham to the East Midlands, with HS2 trains continuing to central Nottingham and central Derby, Chesterfield and Sheffield on an upgraded main line. And third, a brand new high-speed line from Warrington to Manchester and to the western border of Yorkshire, slashing journey times across the north.
Well, let's take a look at how things were until today. This was the original plan for HS2, running south between Birmingham and London and north in a Y shape to Manchester on the western side and Leeds via Towton sidings near Nottingham on the eastern side. This morning, Transport Secretary Grant Shapps told MPs that the multi-billion-pound plan for the eastern leg of HS2 Phase 2B from Birmingham to Leeds, including a major rail hub at Towton, has been scrapped. Instead, HS2 trains will run from Birmingham, not to Towton, but to East Midlands Parkway on a newly drawn route. They'll then continue on the existing lines into Nottingham and Derby, which will be electrified and upgraded. Towton will get a new mainline station with a possible future light rail link to the HS2 terminus here at Parkway. Services up to Leeds will use the existing Midland mainline, which will also be electrified and upgraded. Coming up in tonight's special programme.
I'll be reporting from Towton, no longer the promised HS2 hub linking the north and south, but where one local leader is still describing it as a great day for the East Midlands.
I'll be with homeowners at Long Eaton in Derbyshire, whose houses have been saved from the threat of HS2, but for those who've already moved out, it was all for nothing.
And I'll be at Birmingham's Curzon Street station, where high-speed lines to London and Manchester will still go ahead. We'll be checking in on how people here feel about HS2 now and what today's announcement means for cross-Midlands connections.
Well, in preparation for the now scrapped route, hundreds of homes and businesses were bought up by HS2 Limited, the government-owned company building the railway. But what will happen to those properties now? Well, Lewis Warner is live in Long Eaton in Derbyshire for us this evening, which, Lewis, I guess is pretty typical of many towns and villages which have had its communities changed forever.
Well, yes, homeowners on streets like this one say they've been living in limbo for the last few years after finding out they were on the route for HS2. This road here, Bonsall Street, was told it was going to be ripped in two. The houses on this side would certainly be gone. Over there, they would stay, but they'd have HS2 running down the middle. Now, many people here are pleased that their homes are safe. However, for those that have already moved out, they say the agony of the last few years was completely unnecessary. This is as close as Valerie can get to her former home of 30 years. She lived on Bonsall Street in Long Eaton until 2 years ago, when her home was bought by HS2 via compulsory purchase. Now the line won't come this far north, meaning she moved for nothing.
I'm glad that it's been scrapped, that HS2 has been scrapped, but I'm very disappointed that I've given my home up for all them years for no need, very unnecessarily, and the stress that went with it, which went on for years.
Would you still be living there now?
Yes, I would have been. Yes, because I got very happy memories there, and there was nothing I wanted doing to the house. Quite emotional because I had a lot of happy years here, you know, a lot of happy years.
But Valerie isn't alone. Diane Scott needlessly moved out of her 17th century cottage in Long Eaton. She'd lived there for 19 years and spent £100,000 updating it. In 2018, we filmed with her as HS2 haggled over the price of her dream home. After much back and forth, she eventually reached a deal to sell. Today's decision comes too late for Diane. As it does for Roger Lim. We filmed with him in 2013. Roger had lived in a former railway station house for 50 years. He moved away, leaving the house empty, all for nothing. In Long Eaton town centre, protesters gathered to hear the news being announced in the Commons and breathe a collective sigh of relief.
Elated and delighted that this isn't going to happen. It's been hanging over our heads for 4 or 5 years now. My wife's got cancer and the last thing we needed was more disruption.
I would have been able to see it and hear it from my front room, and I heard it was like 6 trains an hour.
Oh yeah, it's been worrying. It's been a very stressful time. It's something we could have done without.
I'm very pleased, and I just hope that the plan that they have got is going to be suitable for our environment, for our commuting.
On Tyree Close in Trow, homeowners can sleep easy after years of uncertainty. Stephen Harold agrees with the government's new plan to stop HS2 trains south of Towton at East Midlands Parkway.
You know, I'm being biased, but it makes perfect sense to have it on there. It's closer to all the infrastructures, closer to Castle Donington Industrial Estate, it's closer to the motorway. It makes perfect sense to do that.
At this upholstery warehouse in Long Eaton, staff have been making sofas and cushions for 57 years. They lost one warehouse to a compulsory purchase. The owner says it put the business under a lot of strain and that somebody needs to answer for the money that's been wasted.
The amount of money that's been spent, I know from our point of view, the money that's been spent on just this few metres of line is incredible, and I do think somebody should be accountable, definitely.
Hundreds of homes and businesses were taken on by HS2 Limited. If former owners now want their properties back, they might not be happy. Alistair Frew is a solicitor from Sutton Coldfield. He's dealt with clients that have lost property to HS2 and says they'll have to be willing to pay a higher price.
If the government forces you to sell or threatens that it's about to force you to sell, you can seek under what we call the Critchell Down guidelines. You can make the government sell it back to you at market value. However, that's the new market value, not the old market value.
After years of debate, many homeowners are now free from the fear that HS2 brought them, but their communities have been changed forever. Well, in the last few days, I've been speaking to many people who say they're going to really now try and put the last few years of HS2 uncertainty to the back of their minds. They hope that this decision today will finally allow them to do that for good.
So the eastern leg of HS2 is now history, but the western leg from Birmingham to Manchester will still go ahead, as will the entire line from Birmingham to London. And the integrated rail plan has a number of wider implications for public transport across the Midlands as well, and we'll have more on that in just a moment. But first, we've been speaking to people at New Street Station here in Birmingham today to see what they make of the news.
I was very disappointed, actually. I'm from London and I've just come up to Birmingham for the day, and I thought it was a very poignant day to hear that news. I thought it was a real step down by the government. It's very, very disappointing for people in the north.
We've got so much more to spend our money on. HS2, it takes about an hour and a half to get from Birmingham to London. I don't see that's a problem, and I travel up and down all the time.
We don't need to spend millions, billions.
Both regions need good infrastructure, and it's a shame that it's stopping at Nottingham.
Now, some see today's cancellation of the eastern leg as a sign that it's worth continuing to protest against the line continuing to the West Midlands. But they say it will damage ancient woodlands and destroy habitats. But of course, others say they're excited about the potential economic impact. Callum Watkinson reports.
Kieran is about to open a new business along Stapleford Road. She also lives in Towton. She is half disappointed and half relieved at today's announcement.
I can imagine it probably would have generated lots more jobs for local residents and a lot more business for the local businesses. However, on the flip side of that, I wouldn't like all the traffic.
Well, that seems to be the wrong report. I think we can bring you Callum's reports now.
In Woodland near Swinnerton in Staffordshire, protesters are aware they are here for the long haul. The bulk of the work is not due to start until 2024. But those who plan to protect these trees say plans to rip them down are increasingly out of step with current global sentiment.
COP26 has said they was going to halt all deforestation, but with that there's still the western leg part. So I'm hoping that they realise that once now they've cancelled the eastern leg, that the business case and the ecological case is totally flat, and they'll hopefully see sense and that they should stop this part of the leg.
But there's parliamentary approval for this bit already, isn't there?
There is parliamentary approval, but you know, Boris likes a U-turn and I'm sure he'll carry on with them.
All the materials, food and much of the clothing for this protest camp are donated by local people also opposed to the project. At Stafford's ageing railway station later, though, I caught up with a spokesman for the local Chamber of Commerce who are still supporting it. You've got a station in Birmingham, you've got a station in Crewe. This train line is going to leapfrog the county in terms of people being able to use it, but they are losing some of their woodland. They're having their properties compulsory purchased in some cases. Why should they be excited about it?
I think the most important thing is that clearly from the Chamber perspective is the jobs that are being created. HS2 are looking to create in the region of 5,000 to 7,000 jobs, we understand, in the area. Not only in the construction trades, but also in the trades and businesses that support construction.
In Birmingham, always heavily invested in HS2, the council leader said today's news was a blow to the people of the city and the West Midlands. Meanwhile, the author of a highly critical review of HS2 published last year said that the 40 miles of the eastern leg that will still be built is pointless.
You're hardly going to get up to the speeds that they're talking about before you've got to slow down a bit. They could easily integrate this with the existing lines, and there's several of them, maybe put in 4 tracks to allow overtaking of the stopping services, and do that very much more cheaply.
Even here in the West Midlands, where HS2 is hanging in there, today was a good day for those opposed to this project, who have taken the news as vindication and encouragement. And they may need a bit of that in the cold months ahead. Callum Watkinson, ITV News.
Well, apologies for the slight technical issues at the start there. We will be bringing you that first report in just a few minutes. But first, we'll be discussing around half a dozen proposals which have been drawn up for buses, trains and trams across the Midlands, which were dependent on HS2 going ahead in full. They were put forward by transport body Midlands Connect, and I'm joined by Simon Statham from Midlands Connect now. Simon, how affected are your plans by what's happened today?
Well, I think it's fair to say the government's given us a new jigsaw puzzle to complete today, but in fairness, they've put the edges around as well. So we've just got to work out how many of the pieces we've already put in place will still fit that picture, but we're pretty confident that most of them will.
What consolation can you give to people who no longer have direct access to HS2 as a result?
Well, I think what we've got to do now is find ways to get them direct access. So the previous plans had Toton Station, and we put a package together that looked at getting access to that. Now we've got to put a package together that gets more people access to Nottingham and Derby and so on.
Well, the West Midlands now has high-speed links, according to these plans, to London and Manchester. The East Midlands is only connected via the West Midlands. Does this not risk creating a two-tier system?
I think it's fair to say the East Midlands has been underinvested in the past, and these new proposals aren't exactly what people were hoping for. But there's still a lot to be thankful for in the IRP. There's some really big and transformational pieces of infrastructure, but we've still got to finish off and look for those new connections in the East Midlands.
Simon, thank you very much. So a mixed reaction here. Now it's back to Matt at the East Midlands Parkway.
Yes, indeed, a mixed reaction. Charlotte, thank you very much for the time being. Back here, East Midlands Parkway is already a fairly busy station, as you'd expect. Trains coming and going all the time. That's kind of the point of things. It's set, though, of course, to become the eastern terminus of HS2. A 42-mile stretch of high-speed track between here and Birmingham is the only surviving section of the now axed eastern leg. HS2 trains will run from here into Nottingham and Derby on existing lines, and the journey time from Birmingham to Nottingham will be cut from 72 minutes to 26. But what of Toton, the original HS2 Eastern hub just a few miles north of here? Danny Crawshaw has been finding out.
Kieran is about to open a new business along Stapleford Road. She also lives in Toton. She is half disappointed and half relieved at today's announcement.
I can imagine it probably would have generated lots more jobs for local residents and a lot more business for the local businesses. However, on the flip side of that, I wouldn't like all the traffic, the roadworks in, what is already a busy area.
There has been years of planning for an HS2 hub here, with hopes of thousands of new jobs and new homes, a boost to the area.
I'm actually a little bit disappointed because I've read about it. It's been on the media so much, and we've seen all these wonderful plans for what will be happening in Toton. It's a shame because the development, it would have brought people to the area.
I think the house prices would have increased in the area. I think the people's chances of work opportunity, put it on the map a bit more.
I'm quite glad it's not going to come through Toton, as I don't want it to turn into a commuter hub. And the little village that we've got to be destroyed by traffic.
Despite today's news, there is still optimism the area can thrive.
Toton has been up and coming over the last few years, and it could have made it even better, but hopefully the area will still thrive anyway.
And the government says it is committed to investing in a railway station here that would link it to other places in the East Midlands, and then possibly a shuttle to East Midlands Parkway, where passengers could then pick up HS2.
We've already seen a commitment to the Maid Marian line, which connects Kirkby, Sutton and Mansfield into Toton, and the Robin Hood line, which connects much of North Notts into that too. So people who live in my patch in Mansfield will be able to hop on a train to Toton and to job creation. And perhaps in future, the Integrated Rail Plan talks about a direct connection from Mansfield to London St Pancras, which will be incredible for our local economy too.
Still optimism from some then that Toton, amongst all the rail improvements and promises of investment, hasn't been entirely forgotten. Danny Crawshaw, ITV News.
So optimism, but also plenty of disappointment there as well. Well, with me now is Chris Hobson, who's the Director of Policy and External Affairs at the East Midlands Chambers of Commerce. Good to talk to you this evening, Chris. I mean, what's your overriding sense this evening?
Really frustrated. We feel like we've been fobbed off and sold short on what's been promised to the region for so long now. We've got half a railway, and while there are lots of things in there being spun as being positive, we don't think we're going to see the benefits.
What the government, I guess, would say, or what they are saying today, is that you're still going to see billions of pounds worth of investment across the Midlands.
True, but we need to look at that against the backdrop of decades of chronic underinvestment in rail infrastructure. We've got a creaking railway system, we've got zero capacity, zero resilience, and so what we've got now is tinkering around the edges. We had the opportunity to do something, a step change, transformational, and we've missed the opportunity. It's really disappointing.
We spent so long talking about this. Do you wish HS2 had never come up at all?
No, because HS2 will deliver something that we need. It will deliver capacity, it will deliver extra routes, regional routes and national routes. It will take the different moving trains off one track, and it will create opportunities for people to live, work and enjoy their life in the decades coming, and we risk not having that now.
Just finally, does it leave the East Midlands in some way feeling like the poorer cousin to the West Midlands? The investment's going there.
It's dangerous for the East Midlands because investment follows investment, and we're seeing the line going and being built in Birmingham up to Manchester. There's a real risk, so we need to get it right now in terms of what happens next for the East Mids.
OK, Chris, we have to leave it there. Now, this, of course, dominating the national headlines as well today. To look ahead to the ITV Evening News with more on HS2, here's Mary Nightingale.
Coming up in the programme, the Prime Minister's accused of a betrayal over rail after scaling back promised improvements. HS2 will not now be built up to Leeds, nor will there be a new line from Leeds to Manchester. But can other upgrades make up for it? Also ahead, a special report on England's struggling maternity wards as staff shortages bite. Plus, Lady Gaga on the emotional roller coaster of her latest film.
This movie's very funny, and it's entertaining, and it's beautiful, and it's sad, and it's wild, and it's a ride.
That and more at 6:30. Join me then.
Well, we have, of course, chosen to focus our entire programme tonight on that final decision about the HS2 rail routes right through the Midlands. But we will, of course, have extensive coverage of the rest of the day's news in the Midlands on our late bulletin, which is at 10:30 this evening, and, of course, on our website as ever. Well, the HS2 rail project was first announced, if you can remember that far back, by Labour in 2010. The phrase levelling up had yet to be invented. High-speed rail was seen as the perfect way to bring investment and growth to the whole of the Midlands. So what is the political fallout of today's decision to now downgrade the eastern leg? Well, let's cross to our correspondent Alison Mackenzie, who's at Westminster. Alison, what are your thoughts?
Well, my take initially, has the government stopped the progression of high-speed eastern leg because it can, whereas for the phase 1 of HS2 it couldn't touch it because it's already underway with tunnels being built and stations being built. So that's just one perhaps cynical view. £18 billion is the amount being saved because of this integrated rail plan and the changes. But to be fair, it does involve billions of pounds being spent on existing tracks and not least the electrification of the Midland Main Line all the way up to Nottingham and Derby. So that's going to be welcomed. Politically, well, it depends who you talk to. Lillian Greenwood, the Labour MP for Nottingham South, she telling me tonight this is a betrayal, this decision for the East Midlands, an area with the lowest investment in transport of the whole country. But the Conservative MP for South Derbyshire, Heather Wheeler, says she welcomes the decision to extend it to East Midlands Parkway and says good things to come with that link to Nottingham, Derby and the North. Lord Adonis, he invented the whole idea back in 2010. He says talk of the North-South divide, he fears now an East-West divide. Where would you put a business? East Midlands, maybe not. West Midlands, that survives.
OK, Alison, for the time being, thank you very much indeed. Well, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson is currently travelling through the West Midlands by train. Our reporter Pablo Taylor has been speaking to him in the last few minutes and can join us from Birmingham New Street Station. Pablo.
Yeah, well, I've literally just got off a train that's been taking the Prime Minister from Wolverhampton back down to London Euston. I asked him about the big announcement today, which is that HS2 will no longer go all the way to Leeds. Now, that's important because a lot of people in the Midlands, especially in the East Midlands, had to sell their homes and move because they thought, and he promised, that it would go all the way up there. I asked him if he thought it was right to apologise to those people.
Prime Minister, hundreds of people have had to sell their homes and move because of HS2. A lot of those will be in the East Midlands. They were under the impression that it was going up to Leeds. That's something they thought was going to happen, that you promised. Do you think it's right to apologise to those people who've had to sell their homes and move?
Look, I think what you're seeing today is a colossal investment in rail capacity for the East Midlands, for the West Midlands, and for the first time in the history of this country, we're not just building the Transpennine, high-speed Transpennine link, but we're building a high-speed link from the East Midlands to the west of the East Midlands, or vice versa. There's no point in having massive plans to excavate, to dig up miles and miles of virgin countryside over decades, spending hundreds of £1 billion when you could use some existing line to get the effects much earlier.
So no apology there from the Prime Minister, but he did insist that the money that's being invested into the country's transport network will benefit people in the East and West Midlands for years to come.
OK, Pablo, thank you. Very interesting to hear the thoughts of the Prime Minister in the last few minutes. Well, although this news was confirmed today, we've been predicting the downgrading of HS2 for 2 years. Here's our business correspondent, Mark Goff, breaking the story ahead of a government review into HS2 back in October 2019.
Mark, what details can you give us?
Yeah, well, two sources I've spoken to. One is very close to the review panel. One is very close to HS2, the company. But what both sources have told me is that the stretch from Birmingham through to East Midlands and Yorkshire, that will not now go ahead.
Well, that reporting drew a swift denial from Grant Shapps on Twitter at the time, calling it totally untrue. And even though the review itself didn't call for the scrapping of the eastern leg, it does seem that our prediction turned out to be correct. Well, with me now is rail industry expert Michael Byng, who provided information and insight to that review panel back in 2019. Michael, thanks for joining us on the programme this evening. Where are we?
I personally think we're in the wilderness. We've had decisions to curtail part of the project today. We've had an integrated rail plan for the North and the Midlands. If you could have an integrated rail plan, it has to be for the country. So we really need to think all over again.
We seem to have seen so many instances throughout the life of HS2 where the plans just crumble at the seams. Was it doomed to fail from the start, do you think?
It was a train crash, metaphorically and literally, waiting to happen. Side Business School advised HS2 and the DFT in 2015 what was likely to happen. They repeated the advice in 2019. It happens to be very similar to the information I gave to the Oakley Review. So the costs of this project and the difficulty with delivering it and its programme have been known for some very considerable time.
I guess the government now, today though, would say that billions of pounds of investment is coming to the Midlands, east and west.
It probably is, but it may have to make do without a high-speed rail link, certainly to the East Midlands.
So where do we go from here? What next for transport in the Midlands?
Transport in the Midlands needs to rethink as to what's required post-COVID and post-lockdown. The need to create sustainable, reliable, efficient transport hubs in the East Midlands, around Nottingham and Derby, in the West Midlands, in Birmingham, as well as elsewhere in the country at Liverpool and Manchester and Leeds. OK,
we have to leave it there, Michael. Thank you very much indeed. Well, it has certainly been a story that's dominated our news since 2010, can you believe? Here's a reminder of the bumpy journey so far.
Well, next, plans for a £30 billion high-speed rail network for the Midlands were unveiled today.
I mean, this is big transformational change over a long period.
We're up to our necks in debt in England through somebody's fault.
HS2! Stop! HS2!
I hesitate before coming in and simply scrapping a great national project.
HS2!
We're going to lock off this bit, we're going to stop here, we're going to slow it down, we're going to do this, we're going to scrap it, we're going to go ahead as it is. But all of these theories I've read in the press have been untrue.
I don't think it should be abandoned. I think it's extremely expensive.
Is the Eastern leg going to happen?
You will have to wait and see exactly what we're going to do.
Well, that just does put it into some context, doesn't it, really, when you hear those clips? And after months of speculation, the government's latest transport plan has been made public. West Midlands passengers will be able to travel north and south on HS2, but those in the East Midlands won't. The two sides of the region will be connected by a 42-mile HS2 link, but that could still be 20 years away. In the meantime, the future cost and potential benefits to those people whose lives HS2 will affect are still as unclear as the final bill to the taxpayer. That's it from us for this evening. The weather forecast is next. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Making the most of it, whatever the weather. Octopus Energy sponsors ITV Central Weather.
Well, it seems as though we're able to enjoy another very pleasant day. Lots in the way of brighter skies coming through, even though we had a fair amount of cloud. A couple of photos, as always, to show you. This first one's been sent in by Raymond from Burton upon Trent. This next one has been sent in by Maria. Middleton Hall, home to Francis Willoughby back in the 17th century, and still home to the largest lake, a man-made lake in Warwickshire. So describing our weather today, quite simply, moderate breeze, increasing cloud, although we did see some breaks, touch of drizzle for some, but again remaining mild, and it's mild temperatures that really make November very special indeed. It's down to this area of high pressure. Ultimately though, by the time we get to the back end of the weekend, we're going to lose that height. It sinks towards the southern part of the UK, and we see a cold front moving down from the north down towards the south, introducing that cold air, as you can see by the blue on your screen. Now, with the wind speeds, it is going to feel fairly chilly. What we'll find, temperatures returning back to normal. But because we've been able to enjoy mild conditions for the past few days, it is going to feel, like I say, fairly cool. Heading into the overnight story, we've still got broken cloud over the course of tonight. Temperatures dipping down between 7 and 10 degrees. That's very buoyant for the time of year. But it's going to be another dry night, maybe a touch of mist towards the hills. And then we wake up and enjoy the day that is tomorrow. Broken cloud to start the day, but decent bright spells coming through. It's going to be another dry day. The winds fall fairly light, and again temperatures climbing way above the average for the time of year, maxing out similar to what we saw today at around 14 degrees. The main change, like I say, comes to the back end of Saturday into Sunday.
Octopus Energy sponsors ITV Central Weather.